Hello and welcome to the Powered by Rock podcast. We're going to be speaking with the Sacramento indie rock band Oh Lonesome Ana about their incredible new album, Megadeth Tee, the process for creating it, and so much more. I got the chance to hear about this band through a press release for their single, Rushing Lattice, that had a music video accompaniment. And just from watching that video, I knew I had to learn more about this band and made sure to check out the full album when it came out. We'll talk more about why this band is so incredible and why I think you should be listening to them right after this. You're listening to the Powered by Rock podcast with your host, Isaac Kuhlman. The Powered by Rock podcast was created to help showcase some of the best rock musicians in the world and to pass on to future generations the rock music that has inspired rock fans around the world for decades. We want listeners to be able to hear great stories and life experiences directly from their favorite artists, as well as dig deeper into music theory and talk rock like no other show you've ever heard. This isn't about looking cool, it's about getting real and having a great time. Without further ado, let's start the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Powered by Rock podcast. I'm really stoked to bring Evan Bailey, the lead singer and guitarist from the Sacramento-based band Oh Lonesome Ana, on the show today. Their new album, Megadeth Tee, is incredibly well-crafted with lyrics that are, at times, pretty soul-wrenching. So, hey, Evan, welcome to the show.
Hey, Isaac. How you doing?
Good, good. So I think instead of going into your backstory first, I want to jump into actually the album, and then we'll go back to kind of the band in a little bit. But this album is really incredible, in my opinion, because it's incredibly heartfelt, full of emotion, has a great concept behind it as well. When I hear it, I get visual stories that kind of like come to life. It's like I'm watching a movie or something in my head as I go through it. And the interesting thing is that you guys in the band didn't actually write most of the lyrics. So kind of clue others in who are listening on how this album came together, and then kind of how you kind of took lyrics and you also did write your own, but kind of talk about how this album kind of came together.
Yeah, so one of my best friends, Johnny Allen, is a amazing writer, and I've been working with Johnny since, I don't know, we were in a band together kind of shortly after I got out of high school, and we've been kind of doing things together since then. And the last project that Ashley and I were in, our bass player, it's called Sun Valley Gun Club, and Johnny was writing lyrics for that project as well. I think this might be the most extensive kind of collaboration that we've done. Mm-hmm. A lot of the entire concept and most of the bass line for the lyrics come from Johnny and Johnny's writing. And I think just like the way that I work is I oftentimes have difficulty thinking that things that I write personally have any value at all. Yeah. And so I think it's a lot easier for me to see my friend who I believe in, who I love. It's a lot easier for me to see his writing as being valuable. And I think from there I can kind of like start to structure songs that I think still have are worthy of being put out into the atmosphere. Yeah, it kind of gives me a place to start writing and a purpose for writing. Yeah. And I think the way I approached the last couple Sun Valley records, and definitely the way I approached writing this record, was kind of like just, what is the thing that I'm trying to say with the record? What is the record about? And so Johnny had a series of poems that he sent me, and we were kind of discussing, what they meant and, where they came from. And a lot of this is kind of basically Johnny's kind of diary writing is how it started. Yeah. And then from there, I kind of got a core idea of some things I wanted, some parts of, because basically the stuff is it's in prose format. Some of it's a lot longer than the lyrics end up being. He'll write out, a page or 2 pages sometimes, and I'll take parts of it, little lines. I'll kind of like mix things up, develop a chorus. It's just easier for me to see especially with words, it's kind of become a part of the process that I have in songwriting to take something someone else has written and repurpose it as lyrics, kind of
Yeah.
like a puzzle or something like that,
Yeah.
as opposed to just sitting down and writing a song. I think the way that a lot of people start writing songs is they, come up with some chords or something, and then they'll mumble some lyrics over the top of it, and then those mumble lyrics will be formatted into the lyrics of the song, and they'll throw things away and keep things.
Yeah.
But I think the first thing I always think about here, especially lately when I've been writing a record or trying to think about how to write a record, is what are we trying to say? What's the point of this? Why are we doing
Yeah.
this? And then in each song, like, how does this song fit into the record? How does the structure? What is this song about? How does this song serve the record?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think just thinking about it from a point of view of what are we going for? What are we saying first, as opposed to I wanted to write a song.
Yeah.
That's usually not the thing that I'm setting out to do. Is I want to write about something, and then from
Yeah.
there, the song kind of like comes into frame. So that's
Yeah.
kind of how the whole record was created. And usually, the way it works is there'll be like a linchpin song
Mhm.
where the first song I think that was kind of like kicked around was Megadeth Tee. That's
Yeah.
kind of the first song that I was working on for this, that kind of made the whole album make sense. And then later on in the process, some of the other songs kind of like fall in place, because maybe you want a song that has a particular function within the record.
Yeah.
But rarely at all lately do I think about just writing a single song. Usually it's what the big picture kind of a thing. It's kind of
Yeah. And I was going to
most
say,
interesting.
we kind of talk about the concept because from what I can tell, most of the album is about kind of like this relationship with a stepdad who beats the mom and basically mistreats the son. I assume it's autobiographical of Johnny Allen's life, from what I can understand. And I remembered a quote that you had mentioned somewhere about your reason for using the prose of his work from the Dirty Road was basically he's saying it better than you thought you could, which I thought was pretty interesting, and it's a perspective most people, especially lead singers and songwriters, are like, no, I'm the greatest songwriter in the world or whatever. But his perspective and writing style are pretty stark and in your face, kind of like a Hunter S. Thompson or something like that, where he won't back down from language just to like make a point or just to tell the reality of the story. So, other than being like a close friend of his, what kind of other things about his writing kind of drew you to, especially this particular one from the Dirt Road?
I think that for me, people are. I'm interested in people,
Mhm.
and I love people. I like, I think they could be really interesting. They have different stories. Like if you ask them, seeing the world from someone else's perspective, I think is really exciting for me.
Yeah.
And Johnny's writing is just, it's like you said, it's visceral and descriptive in a way
Mhm.
that's inspiring.
Yeah.
And especially for this, and also the last Sun Valley Gun Club record, I kind of just let him determine the framework for the records, because what he had come up with, the words that he written, I considered to be so powerful that I just wanted to kind of be a conduit for the words,
Sure.
and try to get in the way as little as possible. So I think hopefully it's a good compliment, our two styles.
For sure.
Sometimes I worry like about general vibe, or if I've got like the vibe wrong for a
Yeah.
particular thing. But it is a lot easier for me to structure music around words that are in existence, as opposed to, you know, coming up with my own words, which it's possible, but I just don't consider myself as adept as Johnny at, bringing, that kind of vivid imagery. Like his imagery is just spectacular. So
Sure.
it's inspiring.
Yeah. And one thing I always think is interesting when people take prose writing and put it into, musical, songs and stuff like that is how do you find the proper meter to play, because most music is, 4/4, 3/4, some form of a fourths, 4-meter timing, 4-beat timing. How do you find the meter when you're trying to actually play the song and then sing it as well? Because it's not like, they don't stop and end anywhere, right? Like, so you have to kind of find pieces and chunk it down. So how did you go about that with this particular, set of lyrics?
Yeah, like I said, we've been doing this for a while, and in this kind of this structure, and the way that it usually happens is that there'll be a line that'll kind of stick out, and then from there, the line will kind of like inspire a melody of some kind, and then it can kind of be like a point, like a point to stake down.
Gotcha.
Say, okay, this is the line we're going to structure things around, and sometimes it goes very, very like fluidly from there, and sometimes it is. I'll have to think about stuff, kind of leave it sitting for a while, and come back to it, look at other parts. And sometimes I take different things from different parts that he's written, because again, it can be very the prose can be a couple pages, or it could be a couple lines. So there's no format there, but I think that's probably a little bit helpful in my mind, because then I'm not really just like trying to adapt a set of lyrics that are, here's the lyrics, now adapt these to music.
Yeah.
It allows me to kind of use the melody from the particular line to structure the rest of the song. And then there'll sometimes be lines that I want to fit into the song that will also make the song kind of go into different directions than probably I would have taken it if I was just writing like, a structure, because there might be a line that kind of like doesn't fit somewhere quite right. And then things have to change around to kind of accommodate the line. So it's like a more interesting process for me than just writing, a Ramones song or something, which is
first chorus, verse, chorus, chorus.
It could be done.
Yeah.
It's not that inspiring.
Yeah. And I think the one cool thing is that you actually put the original like prose lyrics next to the, the lyrics of the actual songs on the, for the album and for the songs. So you can actually see the story next to it. And then where you kind of, the lyrics don't go in the same order necessarily. Sometimes you pull from the bottom and bring to the top and kind of tell the story in kind of like, a Quentin Tarantino out of order kind of way that still totally makes sense. It's just, you use it that way to kind of make the song work, because you couldn't sing the prose or play the prose as is, because it wouldn't flow very well. Right.
Well, I appreciate, like, one of the things that I was impressed about you, that impressed me about you, is that you actually took the time to consider and like figure these things out.
Yeah.
Because we put a lot of stuff out there, and it's sort of like on our website, it's all kind of laid out, but so much of music, as you know, is the connections you have should be more, they should have more eyes. Like, if you're interviewing someone, they should be bringing eyes to you.
Yeah.
And if you're being interviewed by someone, you're always looking to find the person with more notoriety as a contact. And I think because of that, and because this band doesn't have basically any notoriety at all, it's an easy thing to pop off a review and say it sounds like something else, or
Yeah.
it's got a cool vibe or something like that, or whatever your boilerplate writing is.
Yeah.
It's harder to actually consider what else is trying to do. It's
Yeah.
harder to like dive in. You actually reached out to me and asked me a question.
Yeah.
And we had, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 pieces of coverage on the record, and you're literally the only one who did that.
Yeah.
I mean, no one else decided they wanted to get in any deeper than like whatever boilerplate kind of communication or questions, or normal uh, writing template that they used for their reviews, and that
Yeah.
was kind of like good enough. If you got a bigger profile, I think probably you have more scrutiny. But I appreciate you taking the time to even like consider this stuff.
Yeah.
It
I mean,
means a lot.
one thing I think separates me between a lot of people who write about music is that I also play music and have played music since I was 11. And most people are, it's like critics. If you've never done it, you can't really say much. You have your own opinion, sure, but you can't then go out and say, well, this is, good or bad. Like, if you like it, that's one thing. You can say, I like it or I don't. You can't just sit there and trash on somebody who's put, a lot of time and effort into something without actually knowing what the hell's going on. And I think when, especially a concept album comes out, it immediately is, to me, I'm like, when I see a concept album, I'm like, okay, well, let me figure out what the concept is here. And then I want to hear like what's being, brought out. Like, is it a new voice? Is there something meaningful here? And with you guys' album, I can't remember what I rated it, but it was like a 4.7, 4.8, 4.9, somewhere in there. And I'm like, this is one of the best albums I've heard all year. And regardless of how many people have listened to it or who've heard of your band, I think more people should listen to that kind of stuff, because songwriting is almost a lost art form these days, because you don't have to be a good writer to write music anymore. You just copy and paste. You could literally copy and paste words from anywhere and then just put a beat behind it, and you could make millions of dollars. So, when people actually spend the time to do that, in my opinion, it's a lot more valuable for me to go in there and dig into it, because somebody's doing the hard work. Why don't you put the hard work back into it and try to figure it out? So for anybody who's doing stuff like, and when I do this podcast, a lot of people are like, oh man, you actually did some research on us. It's like, what do you think? I was just going to come on here and be like, oh, tell me about your band name, which I will ask you about, because I know I've done some research on that too. But normally I don't ask about band names, because that's really pointless and who cares? Like, band names are band names. But we'll talk about your band name in a little bit. But overall, I think you did a great job with the album. And I told you this, is that one of my favorite songs is I've Got Your Blood, which is a song that you actually wrote, which you told me is kind of about your grandfather who died before, or when you were really young, or kind of before you were born. And you kind of connected him through like song and stories of him. The song carries a legacy of the family name and blood in some way. And I told you, it's a great song. It was a song that, when I heard it, made me think of my grandpa, but also like, I've known my grandpa until he died, which was 7, 8 years, 10 years ago, maybe now. But can you talk me through the process behind that song? Because, that's a bit different than taking somebody else's words. And what does that song mean? Obviously it's more personal, to put on this record.
Yeah. That's something that when I write lyrics, I think oftentimes when I write the lyrics, it's sort of like backwards of how it works when I'm working on somebody else's words.
Sure.
And in this case, I had the riff actually and a melody, and I didn't know what the song was about. I think we were, my partner and I were walking around a cemetery, and I was thinking about how, I never met my grandpa, but he's buried somewhere.
Yeah.
And I don't know, just this thing of like, in some way, maybe even if you don't know the people that you know, you, your ancestors, even if you don't know, your great 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 great, grandparents or whatever, are they like you? Or
Yeah.
are you similar? Like, do you know them by knowing yourself? And I think that was like kind of the genesis of that song was,
Yeah.
the music had been kicking around for a while, but I didn't know what it was about, and so it wasn't really. I didn't really have a reason to finish the song.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll come up with little pieces of melody or something like that when I'm walking around, but if I don't have an idea of what the song is, what the song means, or what I'm trying to say, then I'll just kind of shelve it. I
Yeah.
used to write all and record all those pieces, but I just don't anymore. I kind of I'll keep them around in my head if they're good, and if they're not, then I'll just forget them, and it's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't ever sit down to write a song. I'm never thinking like, oh, I need to write something right now. It's usually just like the meaning has to be first.
Yeah.
But that was kind of an exception. I did have a kind of a basic structure and melody and chords and stuff for that song. So
Nice.
it just took a while. I needed something to kind of spark that.
Yeah.
And I think for me, the album, the concept for the record is like, or what I kind of consider the concept of the record to be is, what influences you or what you experience when you're young that you bring with you, that kind of continues to impact you, what you deal with, like what you try to discard, and what you can't discard. In the case of like a band that you like, it doesn't continue to impact you even if you discontinue listening to them. But it's a lot easier to get rid of a band shirt than it is your own DNA. So
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think that's kind of where that song kind of fits into the picture.
Yeah. And speaking of band shirts, I should mention that obviously the title Megadeth Tee is not because you're a heavy metal band. You're not, trying to go out there and make hard rock music. It's actually from part of the story, right? So like, I think it was, I can't remember exactly what character or what person in the story had a Megadeth Tee, but that was kind of like the center point of why that was called that. It wasn't like you're writing a song about Megadeth. You're not inspired by necessarily their music or anything. Just to make that clear, if anybody's picking up this album and going, "Oh, Megadeth, I love them," and then they press play and they're like, "What the holy shit? This is not Megadeth." So
What's interesting about this is, even though I'm not a fan of Dave Mustaine,
yeah,
to say the least, he's kind of like this alt-right troll,
yeah,
kind of like odious personality, and I've never been a fan of Megadeth. I did kind of like, after this song kind of came to be, I did kind of like look into the music of Megadeth, and there's some references to some Megadeth lyrics in the song Megadeth Tee. I kind of like stumbled into this like group of people that like Megadeth but are ashamed to admit it, and I've had a lot of interactions with bands since we released this that are kind of like secret Megadeth fans, that they don't really disclose that to anybody, but they would tell me about it. So it's kind of that's kind of been an interesting part of this journey, is kind of finding out who are the Megadeth fans.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just a interesting kind of little aside there.
That is pretty funny. One thing I do want to bring up, this is kind of a little bit off topic, and it was actually based on a concept I kind of learned about when I was going in college, going to school, taking songwriting. There was essentially like I don't know if it was a viral story or what. And this is related to the song "I've Got Your Blood," but not necessarily about you or about you writing about your grandpa. But there was a story about how a female student writes a project. It's for a writing project. Writes a whatever kind of project for her writing class. Gets a B plus, even though she's a top student. Has really good. Everything she does is like phenomenal, whatever. And then a poor student, not a poor like a bad student, I should say, a bad student who's a male, writes one story about his grandpa dying, and then he gets like an A. And then when the female student confronts the teacher about it, I was like, this guy is not a good writer. His story was pretty cliche and it's like a trope. Why did you give him an A? And he's like, well, it's I expect you to write well, but I don't expect him to write well. So it was like good for that person, right? So I was just curious, like, do you think that there's like a real bias towards men showing emotion because it's like we don't do it on a day-to-day basis maybe? And do you think that like when we actually sit down to write like a story or a poem or a song, that it kind of means more somehow? Or is it kind of just all in our own heads and maybe it's like just males that are driving that kind of I guess ideology?
I hadn't considered this. I don't know. I do find in my personal life that when you express emotion, sometimes, especially I think, I'm older, and I think younger people are sort of like a little better at this, a little better at like expressing their emotions or talking through things. But there's definitely been times in my life where especially men have been outright hostile to me because I've expressed my emotions to them.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that I think that's some part of this like idea of toxic masculinity.
Sure.
Where men are can be sort of like antagonistic toward the expression of emotions. But I don't know if I'd ever considered that maybe as an outlet, song isn't acceptable, because if the on one hand you're expected to not show emotion in public, then on the other hand, if you're Chris Carrabba, that's acceptable to do that in song form. I don't know. It's actually an interesting thought. I don't know. I hadn't considered it, but it's interesting. Yeah.
And I kind of also brought it up because obviously for most of the album, you're not using your own lyrics. So I was curious, do you think that maybe subconsciously Johnny's lyrics may hold more weight and resonate with you more because it's from, male perspective than say if a female writer, or is that something you couldn't really tell or know for sure because you haven't been inspired in that way by a close personal friend who's a female writer?
Yeah, we're very close. And I think the writing relationship we have is we had to write together for a really long period of time to get to this place. Like a lot of the first stuff that we wrote together was not very personal.
Yeah.
So I think it took a long time for this relationship to get to the point where, we could have, where he felt comfortable sharing those kind of details in a way where I think he wasn't maybe as concerned about me kind of like hacking it, or maybe he felt more trusting of what I would do with it. So I think there has to be like a lot of trust there in order to get to the place where you would need to write something like this, especially. But I worked with different people, in different capacities. And I think that a less personal thing, it just depends on the individual, It depends on who it is. It depends on like what they're willing to share. I think if I could put myself in their shoes or kind of understand like the background of what they're trying to say, I think it's possible. Just in this instance, it took a long time for us to get our relationship. We've been doing this for a while, and it took a long time for that to develop. That kind of like trust doesn't just happen overnight. So
Yeah, and it wasn't like a critique on whether or not you're only going to draw from men's point of views or anything like that. It's more just like curiosity. Is like, I wonder, like, because I actually recently, well, I shouldn't say recently, about a year ago, actually, I did a music video. I just took some like photo stock or some stock video stuff and put it to an old song that I had. And in my head, when I wrote the song, it was about my dad and how he wanted to be a pilot. And so basically I wrote it about how he wanted to be, in this particular instance, an astronaut, but I didn't write it from my dad's perspective. I wrote it from a male perspective, like basically me, and talking about family and stuff like that. And then the person crashes or burns up upon reentry because the kind of shuttle explodes. But when I went to do this video, it was very interesting because I didn't find any stock video of male astronauts. I only found ones of female astronauts. So I was like, actually, this kind of hits harder, and it's even more internalized for me if it's a female who's talking about their family back home and stuff like that. And I was like, that just changed my entire perspective of my own song that I wrote 25 years ago. And I was like, holy shit, like just by changing the main character to a female visually kind of changed the entire meaning of the song for me when I watched that video. Now, and I was like, this shit makes me want to cry. Like,
yeah, well, I mean, we're like I said, I think people are inspiring to me, and I think that gender is just one cross section of how we can relate to each other.
Yeah.
And there's all kinds of ways that you can relate to somebody else. You can have similar interests. So something stupid is similar interests, or like a similar profession, like in the case of like being an astronaut. So, and those are silly ways that we could be the same. But I don't. You can always, like, from any perspective, right? You can always look and see how you're different from somebody, but you can also see how you're the same as them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a good point, because I think, especially with songwriting, you don't try to create a personal experience that is, widely accessible emotionally or spiritually or whatever for, a lot of people. Right. So it's not like you're just writing, this is about me and nobody else will care. Like, you get it because somebody else has that experience.
I think in a way, like the satisfying thing for me about, working with Johnny is how much I love him, and how much, like, in a way, I'm sort of writing for him.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not writing for, Joe the plumber in Ohio or something, like, and I don't really care what Joe the plumber has to think about these lyrics, because if, like, Johnny's happy, then ultimately, like, I think I did a good job.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot easier for me to, like, look in somebody's face and be like, do you like this? And to feel satisfaction in that, as opposed to trying to get satisfaction of, marketing some song or something to somebody I've never met before.
Yeah.
It's like, if you like the stuff and you are excited by it, or you're inspired by it, or it touches you in some way, I'm really thankful for that. But it's like, it's too much for me at this point in time in my life to think about trying to cater to somebody I've never met before, or think about what they want to hear, or think about what their life is like. It doesn't matter. Like, it's much easier and much more satisfying, I think, for me to think about, like, how can I write a song for someone specific? Like, how specific can I make this song? And, like, can I touch someone's life that I actually know?
Yeah.
And I think I found that in this kind of, like, songwriting journey, I guess, that I'm still on, is that to me it's been the most rewarding part of writing songs. Is not, here, a long time ago, they had and they still do have these things on the like Submit Hub and all these things, right? Where you can pay to have your song critiqued by somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think a lot of times,
usually backfires when you do that.
Yeah, it's an interesting experience. If you've never done it, you should. nice to have someone like yourself, like actually spend time and think about, oh, what does this mean? Or, how does it
Yeah.
fit together? Like that is rewarding. And it's personally rewarding for me, but I think it's a lot more satisfying or personally satisfying or uh, complete. Part of the thing of making music, right, is that you make it and then you present it.
Yeah.
And it's this half and half thing where you making it feels sort of incomplete, just writing a song and putting it on a hard drive somewhere, it feels incomplete in some way.
Sure.
And so I think being able to present it to someone who I could get immediate feedback from in a way where it's like it could be meaningful to them in their lives, like personally, and actually significantly impactful.
Yep.
That's extremely rewarding, as opposed to like Submit Hub, when you're going to send out your song and be like, "Do you like me?" And then
Yeah.
you're going to find out, no, nobody likes you actually.
When I feel like a
Nobody
lot of the
cares,
times
nobody likes
they
you.
pick apart stuff like, oh, the mastering on this was like not great or whatever. It's like,
And
don't
it's
worry
just,
about that. Like, just listen to the music, man.
and so much of the stuff is just, I think a lot of people lose sight of why they're, especially in writing. I mean, I think that's such an interesting game of like creating content about music, because I know why I make music. For people like yourself that make content about music, now that I've been doing this, trying to promote in some way what I've been involved in for like more than a decade now, I've seen a lot of people who do this and then just immediately stop doing it
Yeah.
because it's very thankless. It's like
Oh,
a
for sure.
thankless existence. And I think you have to be very considered about why you're doing the thing that you're doing in order to keep you continuously able to make stuff and continuously able to come back to it. Because if you're doing it to make, a retirement fund, like stop.
Yeah.
If you're doing it because you genuinely love it, and again, I think that's something that's like that I immediately was able to pick up on from you, is that no, I
Yeah.
think you genuinely like music. You
Yeah.
genuinely are interested in it. And as long as that's rewarding, I think, you have a thing to do this for. So it's
Yeah.
like, it rings so hollow. And I think a lot of people just get in it and they're like, oh, I can make $1,000 a month if I review 8,000 songs. And then it's like, it just seems like, wow,
It's punishment.
things that you could be spending your time on.
Yeah.
Anything. Learn to garden or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I always, I jokingly may or may not have said this to my wife, and I don't think she took me seriously, but yeah, I've been together with her for 11 years, been married for 6 years. And I told her that I've loved music a lot longer than her. So if it comes between me and music and her, I'm going to pick music.
if it's something that's providing you, especially during, I think the last couple of years, I think it's like, it became clear, like the value that music serves in my life, and like the benefits that it provides. And I think as long as it's doing something useful for your soul, as long as it's like a way for you to be happier or more content, it's immeasurable how important that is. It really is.
I mean, if you can just sit down and play some music for a little bit, and that's like a release from stress, anxiety, from losing your mind or whatever, like that's a pretty powerful thing where, a lot of people would just be like, hey, can I get some medication for this or whatever? And it's like
100%, 100%. To have that as an outlet is like I said, it's immeasurable. You can't put a price on what that's doing for you. So,
Yeah. So let's talk about some more of the I guess what more people would maybe like to hear about is because not everybody's a songwriter and not everybody cares about what songs about, I guess. But
we can keep talking about it though.
I know.
Whatever you're excited by.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to know more about the recording process. And you guys did the videos basically in the same place or space. I think that you actually recorded the music, if I'm not mistaken. But like,
Yeah. So
kind of
here's
talk to me about how you guys did the music videos and the recording of the album as well.
Yeah, I think that the I have like a few little picadillos, and one of them is I just generally don't enjoy for myself pantomime music videos.
Yeah.
Um, and I think especially as I've gotten older, I think it's a definitely a useful tool. In the times in the past we've done pantomime music videos, those are the ones that get the most views.
Yeah.
And I think the reason is people like to see what they've already seen before. And they want to see you like in a familiar light. They want to see you presented in the way that they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And the it's just something I don't like. And like I said, especially as I've gotten older, I like it even less. So the record is the record. It was recorded with our good friend Jack Shirley at the Atomic Garden in Oakland. That's where the main tracks were recorded, and we do everything kind of like live, basically.
Yeah.
Vocals are overdubs, background vocals are overdubs, and then like any sort of like what I kind of like call frosting, like little ear candy kind of stuff.
Bells or chimes or something, whatever. Yeah.
Those are the kind of things that keyboards, we added some keyboards later on, some auxiliary percussion, that kind of stuff. Those are the things we recorded where we recorded the live videos. But the live videos are a totally different thing. That's another version, another recording of the song.
Yep.
And it was mixed separately. So it's a completely different version of those songs, and it was recorded at our drummer's recording studio, Zach Peach, Dream Cabin Sounds. That's where we did the live video. So
nice.
It's a kind of a totally different thing.
Yeah,
it's just to have some visual correspondence to the album. I think it's useful.
And I think when you said, I was going to say that when you said that, you don't really care about what Joe the plumber from Ohio thinks about the music necessarily. I was going to say the title of this episode should be Evan Bailey Doesn't Care What You Think About His Music.
I mean, in some way I deeply do, but I think it's the least healthy thing for me to consider. So I just don't. I think actively sometimes I'm trying to put up walls in between things that I'm involved in and other people, just because I just generally someone who's not going to think about it a little, even a little bit, or just wants to listen to music while they do the Peloton. I don't necessarily even want them listening to stuff that I've made. It's kind of not for them.
Yeah. Well, I'll say the kind of the visual epitome of that is in, I can't remember which video it is, but you're kind of sitting in bed, just playing guitar and singing along. And it's like, that's how little I care about the music video presentation factor right now, is because I'm literally sitting in bed.
I like that it comes off that way. That's nice.
So I know we got a little bit of a time crunch here. I do want to ask you a couple questions, because I did say that I want to ask you about the band name, because I know that you actually named it after a flower. I think it's the California state flower from memory. So Oh Lonesome Ana plus the song. Well, go ahead. Just kind of explain it so people understand it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of overthought, probably. I was trying to think of something that's kind of that was kind of floral. And Oh Lonesome Ana is I was thinking about Manzanita, but that idea of calling something like Manzanita or the Manzanitas like just sounded awful. So it's a type of Manzanita that grows in the Santa Cruz Mountains. So it's like sort of like a portmanteau of the song Oh Lonesome Me. And I think the other thing too I was thinking about a lot with this project is kind of like folky kind of song construction, or like bluegrass kind of chords. And I think that was where that idea of the Don Gibson song Oh Lonesome Me kind of like came into and they're kind of similar. And then at a certain point, was just gonna call it Oh Lonesome Ana or Oh Lone Anna,
Yeah.
but someone told me it sounded like the Sacramento band Oleander,
Oh
and
yeah. Yeah.
I was like, I don't want to be associated with Oleander. So I mean, not that there's anything wrong with Oleander, it's just not
Yeah.
kind of my bag. That's all.
Yeah. Well, on that, you don't really ever want to kind of be mistaken for another band just because you're from the same area and sound the same, or have the
It's
same
that
similar name.
it has a similar sound to it, and
Yeah.
I think the old band, Sun Valley Gun Club, I think we had so many questions about the band name, and I didn't consider how many questions we would get about the band name, and it just
Yeah.
became like this big talking point about, you know, this band, what does this band's name mean, and like what does it represent, and
I
it's
suppose
just
in California, they just want to make sure that you're not like some hard right, like, gun toting crazy maniacs or something. I
well, I
don't
mean,
know.
one of the things I found with that is like that there's a lot of Sun Valleys, and so we
Oh
would
yeah.
play different places, and they'd ask, "Is it about our Sun Valley?
Yeah.
Is it about this one here, or this one here, or this one here?" And so
Yeah.
sometimes
Kind of like
it's
the
real,
Simpsons, how they're from Springfield and every state has a Springfield.
yeah, it's kind of just like oftentimes like really dumb questions that you get, or just like
Yeah.
underthought questions. Um, but yeah, I wanted it to be something pretty, pretty
Yeah.
sounding. So
Cool. So let's talk about upcoming stuff. Do you guys have any new music that you're going to promote? Play any shows, anything like that? Obviously, the album came out, I want to say maybe August or September. I can't remember exactly,
yeah, we
but
put
it's
it
been
out
a
in
few months.
July. I think
Yeah.
we'll probably start getting together again to work on new songs pretty shortly. Um, we're starting to work on the next thing, I think, coming up here. And yeah, other than that, we just play shows when it makes sense. Um, and if we can all get together to play shows. So yeah, I'm kind of being a little low key on the shows thing.
Sure.
If you know you really like the music and you want us to play, like we'd probably do it.
Yeah, and I know that you have played, like Reno. You play in the Sacramento area. You kind of go up and down a little bit of the California coastline there. But yeah, I mean, I would love to see you guys play at some point. So if you ever make it all the way to Vegas, I'll make sure you guys have a place to play or something.
Would love that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then obviously we'll add some links to, all the music and everything below the episode here. But do you have anything that you'd like to just say, shout outs to anybody or anything that you want to say before we go today?
Oh, just if anybody from the band Oh Lonesome Ana watches this, thanks for playing with me. I love
Yeah.
y'all. Jacob, Ashley, Zach, very talented people, talented musicians. I'm just thankful to be able to play with them.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said, the record is amazing. I think everybody should check it out. I have one last question for you before we go today. Other than
Sure.
Oh Lonesome Ana, what new music or what new song or what new album from like this year would you recommend people check out?
Oh yeah, so I've been listening to some old stuff, and I can't remember if it came out last year, but this band, Spirit Was.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of them.
I'm
They have
not.
a record called Heaven's Just a Cloud, which I love a lot. It's probably my favorite thing. It might have been released last year, but I got the vinyl this year, so I've been
Sure.
listening to it pretty heavy. Yeah,
Nice.
that's kind of. I've been listening to like a lot of older stuff. I've been going through Prince's catalog. Is just I had never heard the new Power Revolution stuff. So I've been going through that stuff. It's all wonderful. There's a country artist, Fred Eaglesmith from Canada. Somebody introduced me to that I've been listening to a lot. Christian Lee Hutson is like a folk artist.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know, just a few things here and there. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I always pass when somebody says here's a country artist, but other than that, I'll probably check out the rest of them.
Fred Eaglesmith's sort of a weirdo, and I
Okay.
think more like a folk, really like a folk artist.
Yeah.
Um,
It's not that I hate country music in its own right. It's just I grew up around country music so much that like I'm just like it's just like snow. I don't want to be around snow because I'm like I grew up in the snow, so I don't want to be near snow anymore.
Yeah, it's nothing like new country. It's more like folky.
Nice.
Yeah, kind of like almost like one of there's a record called 6 Volts that I really like, and it kind of very similar like recording to seems like to me to like Harvest or something like that. It's
Okay.
just very like raw, kind of natural sounding, kind of the opposite of what country is now,
Yeah.
which I
And
just generally despise.
yeah,
New
pop
country
country or whatever they want to
in
call it. Yeah.
every one of its like grotesque iterations. Yeah, that's not my cup of tea right there. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Evan, I want to thank you so much for being here, being on the show. I love talking, songwriting and just, the meanings of the album and everything like that, because I truly think that this is one of the best albums, rock albums of the year. And I think everybody here should at least, who's watching this, give it a chance, listen to it, listen to one song, see if you like it. I mean, I wouldn't label it as like a Mumford and Sons style genre, but if you kind of like Mumford and Sons or, other bands like that, maybe the Black Crowes even, if you like some of those bands, you might like Oh Lonesome Ana. And, I'm not a huge Black Crowes fan, but I do like their music enough to be like, you know what, songs that are kind of like that, I like them. And same with Mumford and Sons. Like, there's something about how you write the music and put it all together that makes it incredibly enjoyable, but also satisfying and visceral. Like you said, like it makes you think and then also imagine what's going on. So I appreciate your time. And guys, remember the Powered by Rock podcast is powered by our listeners. If you want to show some support, please be sure to subscribe and share the podcast on social media as well. You can also make a donation to the podcast if you'd like. It's not necessary, but if you want to help us keep making awesome episodes with awesome guests, go ahead and hit that link below this note, the show notes as well. You can see the full video interview on YouTube as well as on Spotify now as well. If you want to check out some great articles, album reviews, I'm not going to say great. I mean, I wrote them, but they're pretty good. Lists and interviews, go to poweredbyrock.com to read our absolutely free rocking blog. Also find our merch and gear so you can pick up some items to play and look like a rock legend. That's our show for today. We'll see you soon for the next episode. Until then, rock on.